All right, we are back at the KOTESOL National Conference in Daegu, speaking with whom?
Peadar Callaghan.
And what brings you here to this conference?
I just finished my presentation on the use of comic books in teaching, so comic books in the classroom.
How did it go?
Seemed to go very well. It's always hard to judge when you're giving the presentation, but everybody seemed to enjoy it a lot.
So, give us your presentation in 1 minute.
In 1 minute? Okay, let's summarize 15 minutes in 1 minute. Comic books are a very underplayed medium in education as a whole. When you put it into the perspective of second language education, they're underplayed because of teacher bias, not because of student bias. Students are used to dealing with them either in their home language, in Korean or in Japanese or even in French, German, without any of the normal bias or situational problems. But we, as teachers, have this issue with bringing them into a classroom or understanding how to bring them into a classroom, because we just get swamped with there being too much material out there, or we just are unaware of how to change the material to make it more accessible to our students.
All right, nicely done. Presentation in a minute. How much are you using comic books in your teaching, or have you?
Have I used comic books in my teaching? It depends on the class that I'm teaching. I've used a lot of comic books at pretty much all levels. I use them with young learners programs, programs for the Center for the Education of Gifted Youth. I've used them for academic writing classes.
And what's the secret? How do you use them effectively? Because I think the objection probably a lot of teachers have is, hey, this is not supposed to be about fun. This is about learning.
But who says learning can't be
absolutely
fun?
I mean, I think that's the point of using it. But how can you make the case that it's effective as well?
How can you make the case that it's effective as well as being a decent learning model? Well, we look at the comic books themselves, and if we look at basic comic books, believe it or not, if you analyze by putting them through a corpus analytical tool, you'll find that the language in them is in fact highly complex. The study by Thorndike in 1970s showed that comic books had more rare word forms than anything up to and including professional specialist interviews in legal cases. So the language is there. The linguistic difficulty is there to challenge your students. If you're worried about that, the grammatical forms are there because they use reported speech, they use direct quotation, they use conversational stylistics. But they're also using a beautiful thing that we don't get an option to use in the form of a regular book, which is metalinguistic markers. And the metalinguistic markers are lovely things like you're nodding your head right now and smiling at me, which we don't get as much from reading a plain block of
page
text. Whereas we see the image of the person or the speech bubble, the shape of the speech bubble, and we can assume what volume they're speaking at, what emotion they're conveying, how the person is feeling, how the action is taking place, and how that shapes the narrative and shapes the conversation.
Now, are you a lone warrior in this battle, or do you have comrades who are joining the effort?
Internationally, I'm not a lone warrior. I'm far from it. Stephen Krashen, actually, in some of his books, really put forward comic books as a bridge step between what he saw as light reading to more difficult academic texts. I think he got it slightly wrong. I think they're valuable texts in of their own right, and in some cases more complex than academic texts. But far be it from me to argue with Krashen. But there are the people out there who are starting to realize that, wait a second, I can use this material.
What about research? Is there any research to support its effectiveness?
To support its effectiveness, yes. My thesis. My thesis for my master's degree in English language teaching was the perceived and actual value of comic books in second language acquisition. and it looked at student views of comic books compared with teacher views of comic books and how to use them in a classroom.
Is that thesis online?
No, that thesis is not currently available online. However, it is the basis of my submission for conference papers. The majority of, if we're looking at the high-end linguistic studies, the majority of those studies were conducted in the 1970s or back through to the 1930s and 1940s. There has been a very small amount of research done on comic books and the language of comic books in this century, which is shocking.
When you think about how many hours our kids, learners, spend
reading this
with their
material,
face in a comic book.
And then, but we've never bothered to
What
look
about
at
products? It seems to me that someone's going to make a whole bunch of money once they figure out either, I don't know, the idea of like creating a special EFL comic book sounds a little bit boring. You lose the fun.
There are actually a couple of them available
But
on the market.
has anyone tried to like create learning materials based on the real comic books that people find interesting and are already engaged with?
There have been some movement towards using comics for educational purposes. So, for example, Neil Gaiman wrote with his Death series, he wrote a AIDS prevention pamphlet to help, not so much for EFL, but to help educate people about the correct use of contraception. We also had a movement in Nottingham which used a comic book form to educate people on the dangers of intravenous drug use. The U.S. military uses a comic book form for some basic military handbook training. And their research has shown that their students pick it up a lot faster because they're getting access to multiple layers at once. The context is the key.
Well, I think you're onto something. I think we're going to talk to you at 10 years in a conference, and you're going to be the comic book guru, and you're going to have made a deal with a publisher. See, like I think the customized comic books have potential, but I think like if some publisher can make a deal with Marvel Comics or whoever's producing kind of the cool comics these days, and provide like supplementary language learning materials that go with that. That seems like something that would sell.
It would be a wonderful situation. Another beautiful thing would be something similar to what was produced with Ugly Americans, Ugly Koreans, where you've got those images helping to explain the narrative, and then both languages, and then it would be nice to eventually see a textbook being produced from this.
All right, so what's your plan? How are you going to make all this happen?
How am I going to make all this happen? At the moment, I'm concentrating on getting into the writing field myself, and hopefully you'll see my name in print in a short while, and conducting some research on my own. I just completed some research last semester on the use of task-based learning with academic writing.
And if someone out there is listening to this thinking, dude, I'm so on board, how can we connect? How can they get a hold of you?
PeadarCallaghan.com is my personal website. I hope you'll put that in
Absolutely.
subtitles, because my name is a little difficult to spell. Okay. Get in touch with me via there. Please drop me a line. I'm always interested to see what other people are doing, other people are using, and seeing how the materials can be moved together to move the learning forward.
All right. Well, good luck. I think some good things are going to be happening.
Thank you very much.
Lovely talking to you.
Nice to meet you.